Good morning. Thank you for joining us. My name is Monique Wright and I'm Expansion Manager here at Reinteractive. Today's webinar is on the fundamentals of software run by Errol Schmidt, our Sales Manager. He will focus on the first two laws. One, desired features will always exceed available budget. And two, communication is king. I hope you enjoy this. Take it away, Errol.
Great, thanks very much, Monique. And it's very nice to see everybody this morning. I hope this webinar is going to be very helpful for you. As Monique said, we're going to go over the first two laws and how they're going to affect you and your business. I want to make this as informal as possible, so feel free to ask questions. There's a chat and I'll answer the questions as best I can throughout. And then at the end, I'll open it up and you can certainly ask as many questions as you like. And I'd love to hear your feedback after this demonstration as well, just so that, you know, I can make sure that whatever we do is going to be aligned to what you're looking for. Okay, so what are we going to cover today? So first of all, we're going to look at why the fundamentals. So this is called the fundamentals of software development, but why do we have fundamentals? How do we arrive at those? And then we also call these fundamentals axioms. I'm going to explain exactly what that means because it's a very, very precise thing. Then we're going to look at number one, which is desired features will always exceed available budget. Number two, which is communication is king, and then we'll look at some questions and so on. So let's just jump straight into this, huh? Okay, so what are we going to cover? So these fundamentals, really, how did they come about? They came about because of this. We have this problem. How do you get around the problem of coordinating developers, time, and resources to ensure that your project is going to be a success and is going to provide a suitable return on your investment? So we've got all these different factors when we're developing software. We've got the developers themselves, we've got project managers, we've got salespeople, and there's on your side the time and the budget available to coordinate and put all of these pieces together to end up with a piece of software that's going to do the thing that you need it to do. And quite honestly, 99% of the time, that's going to be to make money for you. So if all of those things don't come together, you don't get that thing that makes money at the end. And we've all heard some horror stories. I might even go into a couple later on as we go through this, but these things can go really, really wrong. And here's the sad fact. Often they do. Too much money on things in software for things that you don't really need. So how can this help you? Well, most of the people listening to this right now, you're going to be the product owner of that piece of software, or maybe you own a business that's going to start with a new piece of software. You're going to look at how you can fit your budget and your money into making a piece of software that's going to do the thing for your business that you want. So these axioms are going to help you to understand, how do you control this whole process? How do you bring all these pieces together? And what I'm going to be talking about today and in a series of these webinars is these axioms are written by somebody called Michael Linzar. Michael Linzar is a thought leader in the field of software development. He's been doing it for a long, long time as a business owner and as a developer himself. And Michael has written software that's been downloaded and used hundreds of millions of times. He's written software that you probably use on a day-to-day basis without even knowing. So his understanding and his approach on this is definitely well worth considering. All right, so let's look at this thing. So this is what Michael said when he was developing these fundamentals. He said the first step was realizing that there are axioms in software development which seem largely unknown, and the failure to know them meant we kept making the same mistakes. So as a software developer himself and as a business owner, you look at this problem of how do you get these things done? How do you achieve a piece of software that's going to make you money within the time and the budget that you've set out? And if you don't know that there are some fundamental laws at play here, some facts that you've got to start with, if you don't know that they exist, you're going to keep making these same mistakes. It's too easy to overspend in budget. I mean, it happens all the time in software development. You know, we say a piece of software is going to take 10 weeks to make, and it ends up taking 20 weeks to make. Now, this is not a mistake I make or that we make at Reinteractive, but it's a common error. So you go, okay, so let's not make that same mistake. Let's estimate it correctly. next time. So next time you get to do it, takes twice as long again. Why is this? And this is because we don't know these fundamentals first. We don't understand that there are some laws at play here that if we don't apply, don't use, we're going to keep making these same mistakes. So these laws were worked out and understood from years of experience. So the person who wrote them, Michael, is a business owner and a software developer. So you distill all of the ideas, and these are not something that a software developer by themselves could have come up with, because software developers typically don't understand it's your money that's being spent here. All they understand is, oh, I'm writing this code, and this code is going to produce this feature, and this feature is going to add up to this end result. They don't understand that you want to get things done fast. They don't understand that you've got only so many dollars to spend. They don't understand that there's a customer at the other end of this sometimes that has to use the piece of software. So you need to have that business mind as well. And of course, a business owner isn't going to fully understand what happens on the software developer's side either. The business owner doesn't know, well, when you're developing software, that it might take X number of days to get a particular thing done. Why can't we just do that? Why isn't that so easy to do? So all of these things sort of go together and add up to these fundamentals, which we know, when are applied correctly, end up with a great result. Here's another thing. These factors apply because they're basic to the whole field, and it doesn't matter what you're building. You might be building a web application. You might be building an app for your mobile phone. You might be developing a piece of software to go on an on-prem software. Any of these things, and it doesn't matter what it is, they apply. It could be a very, very simple piece of software that, I don't know, maybe is a chat program, or maybe it's a very complex piece of software that deals with the accounting and the user inputs and has to produce reports and has to be accurate to that degree. It's going to apply. It applies to the largest enterprises writing their software. And I'm talking Facebook, I'm talking Uber. They're writing their applications, or it could be the smallest piece of software. It could be a guy who's just writing a small piece of software to help his business team out a little bit better. So these axioms, these fundamentals apply whoever you are and whatever you're doing. The next thing I want to go over is what is an axiom. So obviously, I've used this term quite a bit, and I know the word axiom is maybe not fully understood, or it seems like one of those esoteric terms. Here's what an axiom is. An axiom is a statement that's accepted to be true. We say that they serve as a premise or a starting point for further reasoning and argument. They're like the basic rules of the game. So an axiom is something we assume is true. I'll give you a couple of examples. Here's one example. The sun rises in the east. That's an axiom. We know it's true. When we wake up in the morning, we don't have to check where the earth is, and we don't have to have a look at where the sun is. We know the sun's always coming in through that window. It's always going to be there. Maybe it's cloudy, maybe there's other reasons, but it's always going to be there. And maybe in some other universe and some other galaxy and some other planet, that might not be true. But where we are here today and the physics of this planet, that's always true. The sun rises in the east. Here's another one. Parallel lines don't intersect. Two lines like this, so long as they remain parallel, they don't ever cross over. We know that's true. You don't have to check it every time. So you can do other things based on this information then. You know that's true. We don't have to test that, the validity of that, so we can infer other things as a result. So what we're dealing with today, when I go over these things, are axioms. They're things that we accept to be true. Don't question them. Don't look for how they could be wrong, because they are true. They always work every single time. And I can tell you from hard-won experience as well, every time they're violated, it's a problem. All right, here we go. So axiom number one, desired features will always exceed available budget. This is the first axiom, and it's the first one for a reason. It is the most important. And everything I'm going to go over, there's 11 of these altogether. I'm not going to go over all of them today, but there's 11 altogether. This is the most important of them. Desired features will always exceed available budget. How true is this? When you're trying to build a piece of software, the natural instinct, the first thing that you want to do is make a great big long list of all of the features that you want. Here's everything that I want. And I encounter this with clients every day, and it's okay. We expect that. We want to put everything out on the table. You know, what do all of your potential clients think they want? What do you think you want? What is the market telling you should have? Put them all out on the table. And then we're going to go, okay, which of these are actually going to make you money? Which of these are actually going to serve the purpose of this piece of software, so that people don't call it bloatware, so that people don't go, where is that feature? How does this thing work? Let's make it as simple as possible. Let's make it as basic as possible, so that we always get the features that are actually going to produce the product, and it's within the budget. You got to know what your budget is. That's really important. And don't exceed it. Don't go, you know what, I could just pull this money from over here, or I could just use some of the marketing money, or I could just use this guy's salary to get some more software development done. Don't do that. Allocate your budget and then work within that budget. And here's what you're going to do. You're going to get out that first version of your piece of software, whatever it is. Get your first version of it out and then get it to start making money. Once it starts making money, then you can pull in more features. Then you can start to develop more. Here's something I know. Pieces of software, when they're written, they sort of reflect how things are in the physical world around us. You know, you're developing screens that are designed to be interactive. We're building things, the same as you might say build a house or build an apartment building or something like that. That piece of software has been built piece by piece by piece. And here's the thing about pieces of software. They degrade over time. They don't stay the same. People find ways to infiltrate them. Bits of it fall off. Things stop working. Some third-party piece of software that you added in last year, well, they've stopped developing that and now it doesn't work anymore. So all of these things happen. So you have to continually update and upgrade. What your clients expect changes over time as well, because something new comes on the market and they expect you to have that thing. And so software always has to be continually developed. So what I'm telling you is don't try to put everything into your piece of software right at the start. Day one doesn't have to have every single thing. The things that you think are going to be needed, the things that you think are required for your software aren't always what your clients are going to use. When I was looking at doing this webinar, I was going, okay, what are some really good examples of this? And you're probably thinking of your own as we're doing this. The best one that I thought of was Microsoft Word. And apologies to anyone that likes using Word. That's not the point of what I'm saying here. But Microsoft Word is definitely fallen victim to this. What they did when they started off is they started asking their users. Microsoft started asking the users of Word, what features do you really want? What is it that would make this software better for you? And as those replies started to come in, they built all of them. They put every single thing that anyone ever asked for in a word processor into Word. Now, they had what seemed like an unlimited budget because everybody was buying Microsoft Word. It was the only product available at the time. All the other competitors had fallen away. Lotus Notes didn't work anymore. Like everyone else was, this is what you were using. And so the budget seemed incredible. And they just had hundreds and thousands of developers building feature after feature after feature. But the budget wasn't unlimited. And what that meant is that they were spending money in the wrong place. And this is what happened. After years and years of doing this, Microsoft sent out a survey, again, asking, what feature do you think Word really needs? And by this time, and now the product's on the market 10 years, every single response that came back into Microsoft was for a feature that was already written and already existed in Word. In other words, what was happening is there were so many features, people couldn't find the ones that actually were the ones they wanted. They were lost in this myriad of menus and options and phrases that they didn't understand and things that didn't quite work as they expected. And so what happened is they'd written all these features, they'd burned all their budget, and the features were there, but people didn't know how to use them. So then Google came in with Google Docs. And they had a third, a quarter, less than a quarter of the features of Microsoft Word. But lo and behold, they captured half the market by doing that because people liked using it. It was simple. It was usable. It did the things that it was supposed to do. And so that's a good example of it. Another good example, if you're a gamer, You might know the experience of the big budget games. And these big budget games, they're as big as Hollywood blockbuster movies in terms of their budgets and so on. And what they try to do is they try to do everything for everyone. They know what the users want. And there's lots of different types of gamers out there. And so when big budget games are written, they want to get as much return as possible. So they try to build as many of these things into the game as possible. You know, they want it to be a first person shooter, and they want it to be, you know, this thing that lots of people can join at once, and they want it to be puzzles, and they want it to be open world, and they want it to, so they try to build all of these things, and then they've got to rush it to market because the budget has meant that they've had to borrow all this money. They've got all this investment cash coming in, right? And those investors want a return. So the budget's not infinite. So they need to get it to market. And what inevitably happens, they put it out to market and there's bugs because they spend all of their time and money writing features and not enough of their time going, okay, we don't need all of those things. Let's just do these few things. Let's do them well and make sure they work. It won't ever be bug free. I understand that. But let's get as many bugs out of this as possible. Which leads me on to this. This is a triangle. I'm going to show you in a second. This triangle really explains how things fit together. We've got three sides to this triangle: budget, quality, and features. And you want to try to get all three of these things working symbiotically. They've all got to sort of fit together, but they never quite do, which is why it says right there in the middle, pick any two, because you'll never get all three completely done. If you've got a limited budget, as pretty much anyone does, you're going to have quality up to a certain point. In other words, you won't iron out every single bug, but you might build all the features that are necessary to get the thing to market. And that's probably how most people are going to start. Then at some point, you're going to switch to quality. Okay, let's get rid of the bugs. Let's make sure the software is completely up to date. Let's make sure all the third-party connections are good, no security issues. So we're going to now apply our budget to our quality. But in doing that, you're going to be building less features because your budget's not going to stretch to doing quality and features at the same time. You've got to get the features later. Let's put them down into a list. We'll get those done later. If you want to work on features and quality, that's going to be really tough because the budget's going to be split in half. So the budget's not going to be available for everything. So this triangle is a very important one, and it's one that you want to sort of concentrate on and look at. Here's the bottom line of this first axiom, and here's what I want you to take away from it. If you're wanting to build a new piece of software, if you're wanting to develop something, what you should do is look at the budget that you've got, don't exceed it, look at the features that you want, and then cut that list right back to as few as possible so that you can build something that you can get to market. That's axiom 1. Let's look at axiom number 2. Communication is king. So communication really means that backwards and forwards. Communication between the developer and the product owner. Communication between the project manager and the person who's going to be doing the testing. Communication between the salesperson and the person who's going to be paying the bills. All of these things are important. But communication isn't just words. It isn't just, here's a problem that happens. Stand-ups, daily stand-ups sort of get a bad name sometimes because there can be a lot of waffle. They can sort of go nowhere. They can sort of not be aligned to any particular result. They're just talk for the sake of talk. That's not communication. Communication means here's exactly what happens. The developers at Reinteractive, here's what they do in their daily stand-ups. This is what I did yesterday. This is what I'm going to do today. And here's what I need you to test and let me know about. So we do that at the start of the day. Then they're going to be doing progress reports throughout the day. I'm working on this feature here. This thing's run into a barrier, which I'm sorting out, but I'm going to be working on this thing over here. I'm sending this thing to you to test now. The tester's going to be saying, okay, I did this test. This thing worked great. This thing didn't work so well. Can we adjust this? Can we change that? And that's all happening in real time. You know, use Slack, use your Zoom messages. Do whatever you have to communicate in real time to get as much information as you possibly can and really understand what that communication is. Really make sure that communication is worth something to you. In order to make that communication worthwhile, the developers have to understand what they're really working on. Now, quite often, developers are sort of put on, you understand what a KPI is, a key performance indicator. KPIs are given to people to sort of measure their production to see how well they're going. And KPIs can be misleading because for a developer, it could be something like lines of code written. A line of code written means nothing. That line of code that they've written could be buggy as all get out and doesn't work, doesn't do anything. Or maybe they've just copied something out of Stack Overflow and pasted it into their application. And I'm not saying that's a wrong thing to do, but it just means that hundreds of lines of code they didn't really write. So you're counting something that perhaps shouldn't be counted. The other thing that they get measured on is hours of production. Well, they work 8 hours a day, so they worked, therefore they should get paid. And that's true to some extent, but it's not really a measure of how well did they do. So the KPIs that we use at Reinteractive, and I would encourage anyone to use these, is features written. A feature, you want to be as small and as compact as possible. Make a feature something like the login form has been written. Username, password, login button. That's it. That's a feature. Now, a feature done means that they've written that feature, they've tested it themselves, the client's tested it, and they've set it ready to be pushed to production. So that means a feature's written. That's a done thing. It's small, it's measurable, it's exact. And don't make it so that you get extra points for writing a big feature. Make the features small so that they're sort of equivalent and they're one for one. And then these are the things that get communicated about. These are the things that are reported on. These are the things that we discuss. So when you do your daily stand-ups, you can say, these are the features, and everybody is clear on it. They're in writing, so they're understood. They're a precise ticket. So everybody can understand what's being done here. And if you do this correctly, you get this backwards and forwards momentum that happens between the developer and the client. It has to happen constantly. It has to happen daily. It means that if a senior person on the line, maybe it's your CFO or your managing director or the board, want to know what the progress is on this particular piece of software that's being written, because the software is going to take 10 weeks, 20 weeks to write. People want to know constantly what's happening with it, where are we up to? It's really easy to give a report because because you've been on it every single day. There's nothing worse than you give a set of work to a developer to get done and you say, okay, now go off and build it. It comes back 2 weeks later. Okay, the piece of software is written. I've done everything that you've asked, shows it to you, and it's nothing like what you wanted. So you've got to start again. So that's where communication can fall down. It can be a real disaster where it's not done correctly. So that's the second axiom. Communication is king. All right, now there's a whole bunch of these axioms. There's several of them, and I want to be able to go into all of these in a lot of detail, and maybe we'll take up 3 or 4 in each webinar. But I'm going to do a series of these every month, and I'd like to get your feedback. I'd like to know, are these the sorts of things that are helping you? Does understanding these axioms help you to develop your software better? Does it help you to, as it says here, make a more successful project? We find that these things are crucial. We find that anytime they're violated, anytime they're not done, that we get into trouble. That if we don't do these particular axioms, these are the things where the software falls down. And here's what we want. When you're working with a company like Reinteractive, you want a piece of software that is going to be successful, that is going to do what it says, that is going to make sure that you, as a product owner, are going to get what you want out of that piece of software. It's within your budget, and hopefully it's within your time frame. And you end up with a client at the end who's happy. And the client then ends up with users that actually have a piece of software that does the thing that they want it to do, that they know how to use it, that it performs as expected. And then the result of that is you get this feedback that happens from your clients back to the user and the user back to the developer. And that's the flow that we want. So the users are going to say, this thing works great. Now, here's the thing that I really want. I thought this particular feature was going to be there. And you can sort of distill all those various ideas. You might get 100 pieces of feedback from your users, and you can distill it down to like 2 or 3. Okay, this is our next iteration. This is our next phase of work. Get that estimated, get the developer working on that, and keep that sort of flow going. And then you might realize at a time, okay, it's time to start working the quality of some of the things. The font here is a little bit too big, or this login form is taking a little bit too long. Maybe let's find out what it's doing that's incorrect, or I don't like this particular piece of third-party software. Can we swap it out for something else and put that in there so that this starts to work better? And you start to see how this axiom number 1 and axiom number 2 start to work together to produce a better piece of software that everybody is happier with. Here's something I would really like to see. I'd like to see the big software developers start to implement some of this, so we don't end up with these bloated pieces of software that do these things that we don't really want them to do, and the things that we do want them to do, well, they don't, because they weren't listening and that communication wasn't really happening. And the other thing that I'd really like to see is when clients come to bring a piece of software to me that they would like developed, is to not go, I want to build the Uber of something else. The something of something. As I think it was Lisa Simpson once said, the something of something is the nothing of nothing. Don't try to do that. Uber have hundreds, possibly thousands of people developing for them at any given time. You're not going to do that. Imagine the budget. It's millions and millions of dollars a year to produce the app that you see on your phone that looks really seamless and great to you. So you want to do something like that. Have you got millions of dollars? And even if you did, I still wouldn't recommend you do it like that. Let's start as simple as you possibly can. And don't think Uber didn't do that. They had something really simple and really basic. Okay, before I end off for today, are there any questions that anybody wants to ask me? I'm happy to answer anything at all. We can have a quick chat here. Okay, got a question. Drag this over to the window. Here we go. How do we know which initial features are the most important to include in a limited budget at first? Yeah, that's a great question. The best process to do is you don't try to work this out as you're developing. You try to do a workshop process at the start of your development so that you can put all of these various features out on the table. And you need someone who's going to look at those features and be really, really harsh, really severe about them. Let's look at this feature. Why do you want that feature? What is this feature going to do for you? And you do that with every single one of them. And from that, you'll actually start distilling and you'll be able to go, okay, let's maybe do some sticky notes. Take this one and go, okay, we understood that this one wasn't really required. Let's put it over there into that list. Or maybe this one could be required. Let's put it down here. The other thing you're going to do is when you're looking at these features, implement them in a way that's simple. So a good example might be when there's a login form, someone clicks on login, does it take them to a new screen or does it open up in a modal that's a box, a pop-up on top of the existing screen? Well, I'll tell you that modal takes a little bit more work. It might not be a lot of work. It might be just 2 or 3 hours extra of work, but it's extra work, and you've got to make sure the size is right. And you've got to make sure it's consistent with the rest of the screen, but obvious enough that it's a modal on top of the screen. It's got to make sure it works on all the various different browsers that are available, and somebody can't log in because this modal won't pop up, or they have some security feature that blocks it or something like that. Maybe it's easier just to go to another screen and then return to the one they started at. These are the sorts of things that you're going to think about. So hopefully that answers that question. Any other questions? Anyone else have anything that they would like to ask? And you can always ask your questions direct by logging into the Reinteractive website, and you can fill in the contact form and ask me a question there, or just go to our Twitter page, which is @Reinteractive, and you can send a direct message to me there and ask your questions, or info@reinteractive.com is the email address, and you can email directly and ask any questions you want, or just give me some feedback on this webinar. I'd love to hear anything you have to say. And I'd very much like everybody to come back and see us for the rest of this series. As I say, there's 9 more of these axioms, and we'll cover a few more in each of the webinars, And Josh has just said, thanks very much, very informative. Thanks, Josh. Appreciate you saying that. Thanks, everybody. We will see you all later. Goodbye.